Have you ever felt that the more you understand, the more distant you become from others? That the deeper you think, the fewer people you can share your thoughts with? It's almost as if understanding the world more clearly comes at the price of being more isolated from it. But it's not all in your head. Society has always been wary of those who think deeply, not because they are wrong, but because they see things that most people are too afraid to acknowledge. History is full of brilliant minds who were ridiculed, silenced, or cast aside. Not because they lacked knowledge, but because their ideas made people uncomfortable. Think of figures like Socrates, Galileo, and even Nikola Tesla. These thinkers were pushed to the margins, not because they were wrong, but because their visions of the world were too unsettling for the status quo. The hidden curse of intelligence. Take Arthur Schopenhauer, one of the most brutally honest philosophers of all time. He argued that intelligence itself can be a curse that isolates those who see the world too clearly. Schopenhauer believed that, unlike others, deep thinkers are often condemned to solitude because their understanding of the world forces others to confront uncomfortable truths. But why does this happen? Why does society resist those who see the world differently, especially those who are intellectually superior? The answer lies in the very nature of human psychology. The mirror effect. Think of this for a moment. When you meet someone who is physically stronger than you don't feel weak. You might admire their strength. If you encounter someone who is wealthier, you may feel envious, but it doesn't feel personal. But when you come across someone who is intellectually superior, something strange happens. Psychologists call this the mirror effect. A deep thinker doesn't just introduce new ideas, they reflect the limitations of those around them, and people rarely forgive that. The mere presence of someone who thinks deeply can make others feel inadequate, even if the deep thinker hasn't said a word. This phenomenon is unique to intelligence because, unlike wealth or strength, intelligence is tied to our core identity. We define ourselves through our thoughts, beliefs, and understanding of the world. When someone challenges that understanding, it can feel like a direct assault on our very sense of self. It's not that deep thinkers are arrogant, it's that their intelligence forces others to confront the limits of their own thinking, and most people would rather avoid that discomfort. Why society fears deep thinkers. Throughout history, intellectuals, philosophers, and visionaries have often been rejected not because of their lack of intelligence, but because they made others uncomfortable. Deep thinkers do not just challenge ideas, they challenge egos. And humans by nature will do almost anything to protect their egos from discomfort. Think back to your own experiences. Have you ever tried to introduce a complex idea in a conversation, only to be met with awkward silence? Have you ever noticed how people tend to shift topics when discussions go beyond the surface level? This isn't coincidence, it's a defense mechanism. People resist deep ideas because their minds perceive them as a threat. And the more threatening those ideas are, the more society will push those thinkers aside. The paradox of intelligence. It's fascinating, isn't it? Society often values confidence over intelligence. People are naturally drawn to those who project certainty, even if their ideas are shallow. This is why charismatic but simplistic thinkers can gain more influence than deep thinkers who speak with nuance and subtlety. History is full of such examples: populist leaders, motivational speakers, and influencers who thrive by telling people what they want to hear, rather than challenging them to think critically. Meanwhile, the truly profound thinkers, the ones who ask the difficult questions, often struggle to gain an audience. It's the paradox of intelligence. The more you seek truth, the more isolated you become from the majority. The fear response. But if intelligence is such a threat, is there any scientific proof behind this fear? Modern neuroscience confirms it. Studies show that when people feel intellectually inferior, the amygdala, the part of the brain responsible for fear, becomes highly active. Deep thinkers don't just provoke intellectual resistance, they trigger a primal fear response. This isn't a coincidence. For most of human history, survival didn't depend on being the smartest person in the room. It depended on being accepted by the group. Our ancestors survived in tight-knit tribes, where being ostracized from the group could mean death. This is why our brains are wired for social acceptance over intellectual achievement. When a deep thinker enters a social setting, they unknowingly disrupt the tribe's dynamics. Their ideas challenge the group's comfort, making them feel threatened, almost like an enemy. The paradox of group dynamics. Interestingly, this fear is even more pronounced in group settings. When a deep thinker is in a one-on-one conversation, they don't pose as much of a threat. But in groups, the fear response spikes. Why? Because social status becomes more important in a group. People begin comparing themselves to the deep thinker, and if they feel outshined, they instinctively try to undermine or exclude them. This is why deep thinkers often find meaningful connections in private one-on-one settings, but struggle in large social environments. It's not about lacking social skills, it's about disrupting the social balance. There are also several cognitive biases at play. For instance, the Dunning-Kruger effect. People who are less knowledgeable often overestimate their intelligence, while those who are truly deep thinkers tend to doubt themselves. This creates friction. People who know less often dismiss deeper thinkers because they believe they already know enough. Then there's the status quo bias. The human brain is wired to prefer familiar ideas over new, challenging ones. Intelligence disrupts this comfort zone, making people resistant to new perspectives. And when people are confronted with information that challenges their beliefs, they don't change their minds, they double down. This is known as the backfire effect. In the digital age, these biases are amplified. Social media algorithms prioritize engagement over substance, meaning that emotionally charged, controversial content gets more attention than nuanced discussions. The result? Society becomes more focused on entertainment than enlightenment, making it even harder for deep thinkers to have a meaningful impact. The society that fears deep thinkers. So, if society resists deep thinkers, what does it embrace? Comfort, predictability, a world where simple ideas and shallow conversations dominate. Arthur Schopenhauer, in his Ruthless Honesty, argued that intelligence is a curse. While others seek pleasure and comfort, deep thinkers are driven by the will to truth, an insatiable desire to understand reality, even if that understanding leads to discomfort and isolation. Schopenhauer believed that most people live in a state of ignorance, chasing after pleasure and avoiding truth. Deep thinkers, on the other hand, question everything, even the very nature of their desires. This is why they often feel disconnected from those around them. They see through the lies and distractions that most people take for granted. They crave depth, but society craves simplicity. Schopenhauer's solution. Schopenhauer didn't just diagnose the problem, he offered solutions. He believed that deep thinkers should embrace solitude, not as a punishment, but as a privilege. Solitude allows them to engage in intellectual pursuits and find peace in their own thoughts. Schopenhauer advised that deep thinkers should seek out like-minded individuals and engage with the world wisely. They shouldn't share their insights with everyone, but rather with those who are ready to hear them. At the end of the day, deep thinkers are not alone because they are wrong. They are alone because their truth is too much for society to handle, at least not yet. History is full of thinkers who were rejected in their time, only to be embraced later. Socrates, Galileo, Nietzsche, Tesla. They were all ridiculed, silenced, or ignored when they were alive. But their ideas shaped the course of human progress. So, if you ever feel like an outsider for thinking deeply, know this: you are not alone. You are simply ahead of your time. Society doesn't fear intelligence itself. It fears what intelligence reveals. And it is the deep thinkers who will push humanity forward. If this message resonates with you, share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever felt the sting of isolation because of your deep thinking? Let's start a conversation. And if you want more insights from history's greatest minds, hit that subscribe button. We're just getting started.